Hi guys, this video is to teach you how to read function notation. So function notation is usually like a fancy F, but it doesn't have to be the letter F. F is just what we use the most often because it's like function starts with an F. But this could say H and then in parentheses X, it could say K, it could literally be any letter, but it usually looks pretty fancy. And the way you say that out loud is F of X. And so the reason that we use this notation is because it tells you what number you're supposed to plug in for X. So if you remember from the last topic, X is the numbers that we're plugging in, and our output is the Y value. So we use this notation this way. We don't have to go through an extra step of me telling you what number you're supposed to plug in for X. I can just give you the number in parentheses that I want you to plug in. All right, so every problem, your function has to tell you what the function rule is. So this piece is what I'm going to use to figure out what rules to follow for plugging in the number that they gave me for X. So this is the rule. And according to this rule, I need to do 2 times the number that I'm plugging in. And I'm just going to leave that blank for now because it's going to change. Sometimes they give you more than one number to plug in. But this says to do 2 times the number that I'm going to plug in minus 3. All right, and we do have to remember to use, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, when we are following the rules. All right, so multiplication would come first, and then I'm going to subtract 3. So that first piece of information is telling you what rule to follow, and basically we just looked at this piece, the part that actually looks like an equation. So if you notice, the way that I'm going to give you the question for you to do is the F and then the number in parentheses. And so basically this number in parentheses is the number that I want you to replace the X's with. See how in the original rule there was an X in parentheses? Well, now that I've put 3 in the parentheses, basically I'm trying to tell you to take all the X's that were in the rule and replace them with the number 3, and then tell me what you get. So you're supposed to have an answer that is the output because you're plugging in 3. So my rule is 2 times, in this case, 3 minus 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 3 is 3. So that's my final answer. All right, so let's go to the next one. Same rule. I'm still going to be doing 2 times the number that we plug in for X minus 3, but now I want you to plug in 5. So I'm following the same rule, 2 times the number that we're going to plug in minus 3, and this time I'm plugging in 5. So 2 times 5 is 10. 10 minus 3 is 7. All right, so what this also means for us is if I were to try to graph this function rule, then this would be the point 3, 3. That's what that means. When we plugged in 3 as the X, we got 3 as the Y. So I could plot that point on the graph, and it would start to show what this rule actually looks like on the graph. This one would be the point 5, 7. Because my X was 5 and my Y is 7. Plugged in 5, output is 7. So if I plotted these points and I started to connect these points, it would show me the shape of what this looks like on a graph. All right, so let's look at C. Why is C a little bit different? Well, if you notice with C, what did I give you? Did I give you the number to plug in for X, or did I tell you what the answer is supposed to be? Yeah, I gave you the output. For this one, I don't know what number I want to plug in for X, but I know I want the answer to be 1. So be careful with these. These ones are a little bit tricky. The input is the number inside the parentheses, but the output is the answer. So in this case, I'm telling you that I need the answer to be 1. So let's revisit our rule. 2 times something minus 3, in this case, has to equal 1. So I'm solving for x. So this is going to spiral back to the entire last unit where you had to solve an equation for x. So think about what I would do first, what I would do second, if I have variable side, a constant side. So I can tell from here, I will need to add 3 to both sides. So 2x equals 4. And if I divide both sides by 2, I'm going to get x is equal to 2. And now I can use the rule to check. 2 times 2 minus 3 is supposed to equal 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 take away 3 is 1. So that works. And so this would be the point 2, 1. That's what this is going to come out to equal. I had to figure out that when I plug in 2, my answer is 1. All right, so let's talk about when you have more than one x. Oh, and I forgot to put the f of x rule. So this is supposed to say f of x equals. So this would say f of x equals x squared plus x plus 1. So let's interpret what this rule means. And I'm going to switch colors just so it doesn't bleed into what we did with the last rule. So this is a new function, which means this is a new rule. So if I follow this rule, it wants me to take whatever number they gave me to plug in for x and square it. Then I have to add that same number, whatever number they told you to plug in for x, and then I have to add 1. So please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, we're going to have to do the exponent first, and then we can add. All right, so A, it wants me to plug in 4, so I'm going to follow my rule. 4 squared plus 4 plus 1. So 4 squared means 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 plus 4 is 20. 20 plus 1 is 21. So f of 4 is 21. And again, if I wanted to try to graph this function so that I could start seeing what shape it would make, when my x was 4, my y was 21. When I plugged in 4, my output was 21. All right, so let's try B. B wants me to plug in -3. So I'm going to follow the same rule. -3, it wants me to square it, plus -3 again, plus 1. Be careful when you're squaring negatives, especially if you're using a calculator app. Sometimes they do the squaring wrong. So -3 times -3 is actually a positive 9, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So just be careful with that. So plus a negative, that's just the same as minus. So 9 minus 3 plus 1. 9 minus 3 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 5. Oh, what am I doing? 6 plus 1 is 7. I was still looking at the minus sign. All right, so that means this point, -3, 7, would be on my graph. So I could start to see what that function looks like on a graph.